Hi, guys. Welcome again to another episode of When the Scriptures Become Real. Get a podcast where we learn, where we study, where we grow. We try to become the best versions of ourselves as we can as we continue to serve our Lord. You can find the podcast on YouTube, but you can also find the podcast anywhere that you can get your podcast. And we're so thankful that you guys are here with us today. So I'm excited. I'm so excited about this. Andy and I have been talking about this for, I don't know, the past, maybe 2 months, something like that. It's been a while, but we're really excited about this topic. And those that have seen the promos, you guys have been excited about it. So it's finally here. So we're thankful that you guys are here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have Andy introduce himself here, and then we're going to get right into what we're going to talk about today.
All right. Hello. My name is Andy Barbeau. I'm with the DeSoto congregation down in DeSoto, Missouri. And my wife and I are very enthusiastic about working with our youth there. It can be a challenge, but it is very fulfilling.
Yes, it is. And that's why I love working with Andy, because as we were talking, it just felt so great. And we talked about this before. It's like, it felt good to have somebody that really just, they love youth ministry so much. This is what we love to do, because we understand these kids are, they're going to be something one day. They're going to be special, and the Lord's going to use them. So, he's just using us to help them out. So here's what we're going to talk about, Andy. And you guys might have been confused by the topic, but you'll understand as we keep going. So the topic is this: physical adult decisions affect the spiritual lives of the kids. All right. Physical adult decisions affect the spiritual lives of the kids. So here's how we're going to introduce this, Andy. As we're talking about youth ministry, it is, like you said, it is the most beautiful thing to work with these kids, to introduce them to God, to get them closer to God. But there is a certain level of challenge that comes with this, because these kids come from different backgrounds. They come from different homes, and sometimes what they get here, they don't get at home until they come back here.
Right.
So kind of talk about a little bit, as we talk about the decisions that we make as adults, it's going to affect how they live and as they grow up.
Well, I agree. Anybody that has kids, or if you're around kids, you notice that they're watching what you're doing, and how you're acting, and all of everything about you. They're going to be watching and looking up to you. So if you're doing all kinds of stuff, they're going to be like, "Oh, that's cool. I want to do that
too." That's so true. And the great thing about it is, too, this podcast will work for those that, and this is the reason why I wanted Andy on, because Andy obviously is married and he's getting ready to have a son. So that's great from his perspective. But then from my perspective, being single, wanting to be where he is. So now for you guys that are listening, you guys can get the best of both worlds here. So the decisions that you make while you're by yourself, while you're married, those things that you do will affect your children's lives. And that's some stuff we got to think about. Because sometimes when we're by ourselves, we can think selfishly and then not think, man, this person that I'm with, this person that I am currently, I'm going to be a father one day. I'm going to be a mother one day. Do I want this guy to be the father of my children? Do I want this girl to be the mother of my future? So these are some things we got to think about as we're growing. So physical adult decisions affect the spiritual lives of the kids. All right, so let's get into it. So number one, so what do we have to do for the kids to help them to grow? Number one, you must love God and the kids before they even get here. So from the single perspective, and then we'll go to where you are. From the single perspective, everything's about us right now. Literally everything is about, you can go, you can do what you want to do, you can go where you want to go, you don't have to worry about anybody else's schedule. Everything is all about you right now. But then as you grow older, as you start dating, as you start seeing people, as you start getting engaged and all this stuff, you start to see it's not about me anymore.
Right.
Now my decisions and everything that I do not only affects her or him, but it affects the kids. So Andy, we talked about this a little bit at lunch before, but talk about that transition from coming from this spot to where you are now.
Right. So it is probably the most extreme transition that you will make, obviously, other than having kids.
Yeah.
To go from being single and, like you said, I'm responsible for me.
Yep.
and I have to make sure that I'm here at places on time, or I could do what I want to do. And then you add a wife or a husband to that situation, and now it's like, okay, well, we've got to make sure that we've got enough time to share the bathroom, and enough time to all kinds of stuff that we now have to consider one another.
Yeah.
And that really kind of opens you up a little bit. Of course, it's a good thing to have that. But because it teaches you, it gives you some more responsibility. And that is what the way that God has set things up, is so that you work as a unit together.
Yeah. And I love how you said that, because that's where we're going. So working because here's where we're going with this, Andy, because how you work as a unit alone, like with you and Liz, for example, give you some brownie points. Liz, you're great. So going with you and Liz together, right? You guys have to learn to become a team.
Right.
So the way that you learn, and especially as the male, as you learn to lead from God's word, lead yourself and to help to lead her, then that's the way that your son is going to see you, how you're supposed. So now the decisions that you make now, the decisions that I make, like you said, they watch.
Yep.
They watch and they see. So we're going to go open up your Bibles here. We'll go to Matthew chapter 1. Here's a great example of, as you're in this state, as you're learning to cultivate and be a unit, you must love God before the kids even get here. You have to. Because here's the thing, Andy, and I hate seeing this, man. It just, and we talked about this before. Sometimes we think it's going to magically happen. If we get together and we're both Christians, it's just going to work just because we're both Christians. That's a great start.
Yeah.
That's a great start, 100%. But I love how you said it's the little stuff. You even said you got to find time. You're not by yourself anymore. You got to work together now. You got to consider someone now. You got to think about what's going on in their world now, not just yours. So before we get into that, I love how you talked about becoming a unit. So I want you to explain maybe the great parts of it, but the hard parts of becoming that unit.
Sure. Okay. So I think the easiest part about that is, of course, you're looking to be with someone who is compatible with you. And, when you find someone like that you can, you get to know them, and then it's like, okay, well, I know how this person is how they react to certain things, what their interests are and all this stuff. And then you can determine, hey, these are our best unifying points. And, obviously no one is the same, and that's a good thing. Again, because otherwise, if you're with the same person as yourself, then it's it could be a little stale, put it that way. But it is, the challenge is to work those quirks that each of you have into, where does God want us to be 5 years from now.
Right.
So where you are when you get married, as, okay, now we're starting this partnership. We know that we have goals together, and, each of us have separate goals, and how do we get towards that direction and let God lead us there together?
I love how you're saying, because this is great, because what we're doing, we're building something here. So you're going to understand what we're talking about. Everything that we decide to do at this point, when children come into the picture, and we'll get into this later, every decision that we've made up to this point, it will affect them for the good or for the worse. And so here in Matthew 1, here's an example of exactly what Andy's talking about. Two people who are not married yet, but they're learning through certain problems. What are we supposed to do right now? So think about the position that God put Joseph in. He loves Mary. They're together, but she's with child without them doing anything. So now, what do? It's a tough position.
Yeah.
So now this is a part of the unit, because you think about this, Andy. What if that happened today? You got a guy and a girl together. Girl randomly gets pregnant, but it's not by anybody else. It's not by him. Most likely, what do you think the guy would do today?
Oh, it's time to go.
It's time to go. Oh, I think I got a roast in the oven, so it's been fun.
Yeah.
But think about, when we think about building a team, you don't build just in good times.
Right.
You build, and I want you to talk about that a little bit too before we get to Matthew chapter 1. Building, most of the times, even in scripture, when you look at the word build or grow or trial or valley, whatever you want to look at, it's not a let's run away from it.
Right.
Whenever those words come up, right? Psalm chapter 23, verse 4, walk through the valley. 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 18, right? Grow in the grace and knowledge. Mm-hmm. So whenever you see grow, build, all those things, they're going through something together. But many times in our society today, when you talk about a team, it's so easy to bolt when things get hard. So talk about, as you grow and build, as you're growing together, growing through those tough times too.
Well, I think that's a good question, because in today society, there's a lot of push for, this isn't working, let's move on to the next thing.
Yep.
And that's not just with relationships,
that's with everything.
Everything.
Yeah, with right? Everything.
And so to be a better unit, obviously at the core, you have got to have God.
Yes.
At the core of your relationship, or whatever it is that you're doing, that you're trying to do for good, you've got to have God right there.
Yep.
As your cornerstone. Because otherwise, then you're subject to all kinds of outside pressures. And, if you don't have faith in God, man, that opens you up to, well, I can just do whatever I want.
Yep.
And, not even, and there's some married people that live this way too, where, one person is doing their own thing all the time and they're never together. It's more of a, hey, we're going to live together and have dual income, and, we're going to have all this nice stuff. And you've kind of lost purpose of what you're trying to do. And that is to be an earthly example of the love that God has for his church. And
ooh, that's good. That's good. I'm taking notes. Ooh, that's good.
But you've got to make a commitment to work through the tough times.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
You could have illnesses. You could have the loss of a child. There's so many things that can go wrong, and that is just the way that the world is, because this is a fallen world.
Yeah. Ooh. Okay, now let's sidebar. Going back to your example, right? Ephesians chapter 5, right? Mm-hmm. Husbands, love your wives, even as example, even as Christ loved the church. So I love how you say you are to be on both sides, not just the male, but you are to be an earthly example of how Christ loved the church. Which, when you think about it, what did he do for her?
Lay down his life.
Lay down his life. He suffered. He was betrayed. He did everything for her.
Yeah.
And so that's the beautiful thing. And quick sidebar, ladies, that's a great example for you from Ephesians 5. Mm-hmm. What is he willing to do for you when the fun times stop?
Yeah.
Because when Christ sacrificed for the church, it wasn't all great. Christ did get his praise when he was here, but Christ also was betrayed. He was hurt. He was kicked out. He was all, his own family didn't accept him.
Yeah.
But he did it all for her. So that's I love the part of building that unit. Sometimes we have this concept of, I can only build as long as things are good for me. As long as things are convenient and are working the way I want them to work, then I can build. But the first sign of it's tough, it's struggle, this is not okay. I did a lesson on Michael Jordan's trainer.
Oh, okay.
And so he said sometimes you have people that are coolers, meaning they'll give you exactly what you want when you want them to do it. So that's not necessarily a good or bad thing.
Yeah.
Then you have guys that are closers, meaning they can be extraordinary at whatever they want to be extraordinary at, but they can only be extraordinary with themselves and with other people when things are perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So when things at work are great, I can be great for you, Andy. When things at the church are great, I can be great for you.
Mm-hmm.
When things in my personal life are great, I can be great for you. But the moment one of those messes up, I can't be great for you. So then I turn into a cooler. But then he says there's a closer, which is the MJ mentality, where no matter what happens, whether it's good or bad, I will be there. Whether it's terrible, I'll always be there. Whether it's good, I will always be there. You'll find a way to be there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, think about, that's the beauty of Christ. He always just found a way to be there for the church. And so as you talk about here in Matthew chapter 1, verse number 18, right? Now the birth of Jesus Christ was on this wise: when his mother Mary was espoused to Joseph, before they came together, she was found with child. Then Joseph, her husband, being, here we go, a just man, Christ, Ephesians chapter 5, and not willing to make her a public example, was minded to put her away privily. So how did he act godly here? Verse 20, he thought on these things. So when we talk about you must love God before the kids even get here, look how much Joseph loved Mary and loved Jesus even before they got here. So it's something that, and I want you to talk about this, talk about, especially with you getting ready to have a son, talk about how both of you and Liz, you guys cultivated this together. Now, when he gets here, now you'll understand this is where we're going to go with him.
Sure. Well, when you, okay, so
there's so much.
So to be like Joseph, because, you made a point to emphasize that, it says Joseph was a just man. And what we would take that to mean is that Joseph, trusted God in this situation. Now, of course, in this kind of thing, had never happened before. Of course, it was prophesied, but even many people still fail to see those. But I think the first thing is that I've got to be right with God myself first, and then when you're encountering a situation where you're going to have, I wasn't expecting this. What should I do in this situation? And he didn't jump to conclusions. He didn't, I'm going to publicly shame Mary, and all this stuff because, that just
he could have.
He could have done that.
The law. Remember, she could have died. She could have died because of that.
Yes. And so, because, of course, we know that just very shortly after that, the angel came and visited Joseph.
That's it.
He's like, hey, it's okay. You're going to be fine. This is what you need to do. And, but he could have done something about it before that. But instead he thought.
That's it.
He took some time to consider, what does this mean? What do I want to do for the future for myself and also for Mary and potentially a family?
Yeah. I mean, and you think about, and this is where we're going. I know we're going to talk about the kids, but we got to start with the two original first. Yes. So look at what they're doing here before the kids even show up. Joseph's being just, but also look at it from Mary's position. We don't look at it from her position either. Think about from her position. They're not married, but look how much she trusts him. You're going to take care of me. I mean, just think, there's the unit part you're talking about. They're learning right now in Matthew chapter 1. Before Jesus gets here, chapter 2, they're learning to gel. And they're gelling through these things. And notice what God is doing. God is telling Christ, you're going to come into a great family. I'm working on Joseph right now. I'm working on Mary right now. So now from your position, right, with your son, I'm working on a great family for you right now. Liz and Andy, before y'all got here, they were working. They were building. They were growing. They were learning. Now you're here. Now look how much farther ahead your son's going to be, because you as a single man worked. Liz worked. Y'all got together. You worked. Now, when he gets here, now you guys can work with him. It's a beautiful image from Matthew 1. But we kind of, I just thought about that sitting here. I was like, wow, that's amazing. But it's the way the Lord designed it.
Yes.
It's the way he designed it.
I absolutely agree.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. So here's a second example. So remember in 1 Samuel chapter 2, right, with Hannah, before we really get to how these decisions affect the kids, remember when Hannah prayed to the Lord and she was so sorrowful? She said, man, I just want a son. I want a son. I want a son. And the Lord gave it to her. But notice how she prayed and she desired, even though she was sorrowful. Mm-hmm. So the thing about Joseph and Hannah here, they're cultivating this while they're single. They're cultivating this thought process even while they were together. So here's the application of where I want to get to. I want to get your thoughts on this, Andy. Loving your future husband, loving your future wife doesn't just happen off of just being together. So I think that's where we mess up so many times. Well, he's a Christian. That's great. She's a Christian. That's great. Y'all together. That's great. But then there's no work. Mm-hmm. So you just expect that things are going to work out. Well, my family loves them. My mom loves them. The kids love them. That's great. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that's wrong. But we put so much eggs in that basket. Then we say, I do. Then problems happen. And then we're confused. Well, what's going on? Well, wait a second. Y'all didn't do any work. Mm-hmm. You just expected it to work out. Well, he's a Christian, so he should just do it. So talk about just the work aspect of getting together, not just being together.
Yeah, that's an important distinction.
Yes.
Excuse me. Because there are definitely a lot of people who are just
together, right?
And they're not working together, or even sometimes they have opposite goals and they're working against each other to get what they want.
Yeah.
Now, I would say that the very first part of that is to have a foundation in Christ, in God. And by doing that, you make a commitment that, this is what where I want my life to be going towards God. And then I'm going to add a wife, okay, for in my situation.
Yeah.
What is it that we are capable of doing together to help further the work of the church? And, when Liz and I got together, I was already kind of trying to work with the kids, in DeSoto, and just having Liz come aboard, and she awesome. She loves kids, awesome. And so she was right there with me. Hey, let's do this together. How can we do more to help? So, you've got to sit down and talk about that stuff, though. You can't just expect somebody to understand, this is where we're going.
Right. That's true. And as we're talking about that and building, and again, I'm taking notes here. So if you guys see me looking down, I'm taking notes, but it's good because in the single mindset, what we can do is just, we can assume so much, and in your position, you were working with the kids and you were just so one track minded with, okay, we got to take care of the kids. We got to plan this and we got to preach. I got to do all this stuff. That's great. But it's almost like the communication wasn't there. Okay, where are we going to go with this? Where are we going to build with this? So that's a part of the gelling process that you talked about. But I love that distinction that you mentioned too. There's a difference between being together and working together. So Joseph and Mary, they were together, but they were working together through the problem. So we're saying this point this is just foundational stuff we're talking about before we get into the kids. So the way that you cultivate right now is what determines what your children's going to have. Mm-hmm. And so for me, from my position, I want my kids to, have a mom that loves the Lord, to have a dad that loves the Lord, so that when they're together, not just at the church, when they're at home, they know we're okay. So from your position, right, getting ready to have a son, you want him to know mom loves dad, dad loves God, dad loves you. So this is something that it doesn't just happen. Well, he's a Christian. We're going to talk about that later. Right. I can't tell you how many horror stories people I'll just be together because we're Christians. Yeah. And there's no work, there's no conflict, there's no talking stuff out. So number one, so this is foundational stuff. Now we're going to get to the kids here. So number one, physical adult decisions affect the spiritual lives of the kids. So we have to cultivate stuff like Joseph and Mary cultivated it. Mm-hmm. So then number two, as we talk about this a little bit more, right, your partner who you're with will either make the kids mm-hmm. or they will break them. So like we said, Matthew 1, 1 Samuel chapter 2, both parties must have a genuine, notice the word I mm-hmm. expressed there. Both parties must have a genuine love for God. Mm-hmm. So we have to be careful with just the being together part, because you can be with someone that's not genuine, and they can wear the title Christian mm-hmm. and not be genuine. So here's an example, and we talked about this before we press record here, but 1 Samuel 25. Oh, this gets me every time. 1 Samuel chapter 25. But here, as we look at it, so verse 1, and Samuel died, and the Israelites were gathered together and lamented him and buried him in the house of Ramah. And David arose and went to the wilderness of Paran. Then verse 3, now the name of the man was Nabal, and the name of his wife was Abigail, and she was a woman of good understanding. But notice who she married. She was beautiful countenance, but the man she was with was churlish and evil in his doings, and he was of the house of Caleb. So notice what house he's a part of. The house mm-hmm. of Caleb. And who was one of the two that said we can take the land? Caleb. So just because they're in the right church, they're baptized, and they show up to worship, mm-hmm. doesn't mean he's the right man. Doesn't mean she's the right one. So you got to be careful, because sometimes we just base, well, they show up, they're here. Mm-hmm. A lot of times, and I want you to talk about this, Andy, too. A lot of times we can focus on, what someone's not doing rather than what they are doing. Mm-hmm. So he comes to worship. He doesn't drink. He doesn't do this. At least he does this. That's great. But what is he or she doing?
Right.
So kind of talk about that coming together, that partner will either make or break the kids, especially in Abigail's position here.
Mm-hmm. I think that speaks to also the importance of, getting together outside, as Christians, by getting together outside of a formal church setting to, that gives you an opportunity, because we know that, not everybody acts the same everywhere they go,
yes.
And that's, I feel like that is a more pervasive problem these days, especially with terms of quote unquote religious people.
Yes.
And so you've got to understand that, hey, this person, you're right. They may be here. They may be,
which is great. Which is great.
Is good.
Which is great.
It is good to be there, because even if you're there, or well, not even if, but if you are there, you have a better chance of hearing and, coming to understanding.
Right.
So, it is good to be there. We have some members of our congregation that they're still not, mm-hmm. They have not been saved.
Yeah.
But I tell you what, they're there and they're hearing the word. And what we learned from Paul is that, hey, we're planting the seed, some other people are going to do the watering, but ultimately it's all going to happen in God's time. So, but by being together with your fellow Christians outside of a formal setting can help you learn about them, and for them to learn about you and who you are as a person, your personality, and all this other kind of stuff that is ultimately critical when you're trying to choose someone to spend the rest of your life with.
Yeah.
Because, and you see it all the time, and it's not just it's in the church, like you mentioned as well. People are people. Mm-hmm. We're all fallen, and we all fall short.
Yep.
So, but the key is to catch those kind of behaviors before you make a commitment to someone, and then find out later, oh man, this is not the person that I thought I was marrying.
Yes. And again, on the single side, that's something that we could do, and I could do better too, is I like how you mentioned seeing somebody outside of a formal setting. So that's a good point. That's something I could do better too. That's really, really good. But here, as you talked about this in First Samuel 25, the thing about it is, and this is where we start getting to the kids, because when you have two people that are just together and then they get married, my family likes them. That's great. My family likes me. That's great. We're Christians. That's great. So then y'all just get together just based off that alone. Just based off that alone. My best friend likes them. That's great. Then you guys get together, you guys get married, right? So then you get married, and then this is where the kids, and this is where me and you got the chills talking about stuff. We hear the horror stories of guys just coming to worship for her, or guys doing whatever they have to do. Maybe not even with malice, but if I just show up, if I love her mom, if I love the kids, I'll get her.
Yeah.
So then they get her. And when they get her, then she realizes this is not, it's too late. It's too late. So then they have kids. Now those kids come to us. Then those kids come to us. We plan the youth events for them, help them out, but then they go home to a family that's not nurturing.
Yeah.
So now talk about who we're with and who we eventually work with. That's how the kids are going to, because you got to think about some of these kids growing up, they don't want to get married because of what they see in the home. So kind of talk about the importance of the nurturing of the home and you guys getting together and nurturing the right type of thing.
Yeah. So I think as we're men here, coming from that standpoint of I need to be the leader spiritually in my household. It doesn't mean I have ultimate authority.
It's not dictatorship,
everything. Right? But my job is to make sure that my wife and my kids are spiritually healthy. In my home.
Oh, great word. Great word. Great word. Healthy. Great word.
Right. And in order to do that, I have to make sure that I am spiritually healthy first.
Yes, sir.
But in regards to trying to make sure that we have the right goals in mind. That's a lot of personal responsibility.
Yes, it is.
But also, hey, tell your wife, tell your, husband, this is where I want, I have these desires to work for the Lord, or, we need to be together for our children's sake. Because I think you can see the results, and I growing up, and even today, and, I'm sure that there will be in the future, I've known people that, my spouse doesn't come. And my kids, they don't come.
Oh, hate to see.
And that is tough.
It's hard
because you want them to be saved, but because you have found yourself in this situation, the chances of the kids being able to it's not impossible.
Right.
But it does make it much harder for them to come to the truth if you're unequally yoked. We'll put it that way.
Yes. And when you see these kids coming from all these homes, you have kids that come from nurturing homes, you have kids that come from broken homes.
Yeah.
But when they come together, those kids are one.
Yes.
Those kids are one. So understand that no matter what home these kids come from, they're one when they're here.
Right.
So when they're here, they're together. They love being together. They want to do stuff. They want to know about God. They want to talk about their problems and their issues, right? And they love being here. But then I'm telling you, and you see it too. You saw when we did our thing here. Guys, we got 10 minutes left. Guys, we got 5 minutes left. Then that smile you can see, because now they know I got to go home.
Yeah.
I got to see this. I got to go home to a dad that doesn't want to be there. I got to go home to, but now think about the great thing about seeing somebody like you, man, those kids are thinking, man, I wish I had a dad like Andy. And I wish I had a dad like Jordan. I wish I had. So now you can see they don't want to go home. And that's the sad part is the way that we cultivate while you're single and while you're where Andy's at, you want your kids to want to come home. Right. You want them to, yes, love what's at the building, but also love what's at home too.
Yeah.
And so many times with youth ministry, I see so many parents regret certain decisions that they made because they see their kids suffering. They see it. And so if you're single out there, if you're dating out there, great. Do what you got to do. That's wonderful. But understand when the fun stops, and it will stop. When the fun stops, you got to realize, is this guy, is this girl, are they going to be somebody is this somebody that I want my kids around to lead my home, to make sure my kids are spiritually, I love that word, spiritually healthy. You know, to be healthy, it takes work. To be spiritually healthy, it takes work. So, I mean, before we go on, I want you to talk about what you've seen in youth ministry from these kids and some of the homes that they come from.
Well, so what we do at DeSoto, we do have some, what I would call congregational kids. Their parents are there. But on what we usually do, we have a pretty core group of kids that we bus in from the community. And some of them we know, through other various, my wife's younger sisters, still in school, that kind of stuff. But, seeing some of them are coming from good homes where, even if they're not in their parents' home, they're with guardians that are concerned about them. They want them to go to church. They want them to be learning and doing well. And then we've got parents that, hey, we're going to send our kid because we want a free night. Yeah. Or, you're going over to Illinois for several hours. That's great. That means I have the whole night free. And, of course, involvement with the kids is generally the best indicator of a successful, of leading to success for the kid. But that's not always going to be the case. And it's hard to see that. Sometimes it's hard to let them go. Yes. Because that maybe they're not going to eat dinner tonight. Or maybe they're going to get hurt tonight. You don't know. And that is tough. Yeah. But, it as working with youth, through the church, it almost doubles or triples your drive want to teach them the right way so that they have an opportunity to see my life doesn't have to be the way that my parents' life was. And I think it ultimately comes down to that, because you're not going to be able to save the kids from their parents. I mean, you're not going to be able to do that. But what you can do is save their soul through Jesus Christ. That's it. And if you can lead them to that, then they will have their very best chance to succeed in this life and to put forward their very best in the future. Yes. And the beautiful thing about it is, with you working in youth ministry, but also I think it's important, being single, working in youth ministry, it opens my eyes to so many things. Yeah. Because as I work with these kids and work with so many people and worked with people before, it's like, it gives, like you said, it gives me a certain drive, because I know what type of homes these kids go to. And it gives me the drive, Lord willing, as I try to, do what he wants me to do, my home's not going to be like that. Right. You see certain homes. Yeah. And, as a man right now by myself, I will try my absolute best. My home is not going to be like that. Yeah. So, my kids are, Lord willing, hopefully, they'll come home to something different than what I see. And so it opens your eyes to some stuff. But when we talk about from the kids' perspective, this is why our decisions affect people that aren't even here yet. So this is why stuff like dating, it shouldn't be, and I mentioned this in a previous podcast, it shouldn't be a plaything anymore. It shouldn't be, I just want a good time. That's fine. But at the same time, you got to understand, and especially if we're older, we're kind of wasting time, because now it's like, you got to see who really wants this, who really, like you said, who wants to lead a family, who wants to love God like this. And so the thing about the kids is,
Yeah, I remember in Memphis, like these kids would come from good homes and bad homes.
Mm-hmm.
And so here's the great thing about them. And this is why you want to provide a safe haven for these kids.
Mm-hmm.
Because on a random Tuesday, on a random Thursday, on a random Saturday, I mean, we haven't planned a youth event at all. Hey, can I come up to the office? Hey, can I come up to your apartment? They come up and we don't talk about their problems, but I know they got them.
Mm-hmm.
We don't talk about what's going on, but I know something's happening. But guess what? All they want to do? Let's just sit here, eat some popcorn, and listen to music.
Yeah.
I just want some peace. Let's just sit here and watch a movie. Let's just sit here and just talk with a bonfire on the porch.
Yeah.
Kids want peace.
Yeah.
That's all they want. Now they might run around chaotic and be crazy with their Nerf guns and all that, but ultimately, kids know where the peace is at.
Yeah.
And that's for us as single people and where you are now, that's something that we want to provide for the kids.
Yes.
As a safe haven here at the Church of Peace. And when they come home, you're okay too. You're okay.
Right.
So here's what I want to mention too. So in Ruth chapter 4, as we talk about the safe haven, the home and the church should be that. So remember in Ruth 4, when Boaz and Ruth got together, he said Boaz would be a nourisher of your soul. He will take care of you. He will do all these things. Mm-hmm. And from Boaz, right, came Jesse, came Obed, came David, then came the line of Christ.
Yeah.
So, sometimes, it's the weirdest thing. And I don't want you to talk about this too, Andy. Sometimes after youth events, I don't want the kids to go home because I know you're not going to get what you just got here.
Right.
And so think about from Boaz's perspective, she said, look how much he's going to take care of you. He's going to take care of you, your kids. And then look who came through him, Jesus. So kind of talk about that, that love for the kids that sometimes I just don't want y'all to go because I know what y'all got to face when you leave here.
Yeah. And like I said, it is difficult, especially knowing that some of them are going home to rough situations.
Yeah.
But something that you meant, about the peace and just wanting a place to come together. And I think that that's where the understanding that, through Christ, we can obtain that peace.
Yeah.
But this world does not necessarily facilitate that.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to, as these kids are at these events, they're having fun, they're doing learning. You see sometimes like a blossoming of, like, oh man, this is what I want to.
You can see it.
You can see the kids like, well, I want to be here. I want to continue to come. I want to do all this stuff and be with these friends. And to translate that into an understanding that this is what Christ is all about.
Yep.
This is what he's all about. Because, like we talked about with, with Mary and Joseph and becoming a unit, as Christians, getting too excited. As Christians, we are to come together in unity.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that we want to be fostering this idea for not only our adults and our older adults, but for the kids too, so that they understand, hey, when I'm having a rough time, not even as a kid, if I need somewhere to go to escape, this is where I go. I go to the church. As an adult, if I'm having trouble, I can go to the church and know that they will help me. They will pray for me. They care for me later on, and that's what we're trying to stir up now, is so that they understand it later on.
Ooh, Andy's trying to preach. It's not even Sunday yet. Not even Sunday yet. So, okay. So real quick, going where you just mentioned. So what you said about the kids, right? About, they want to be here, right? Mm-hmm. They want to be with everyone else. They want to get to know Christ more. Let's go back to the cultivation part real quick. So we go back to that cultivation part before the kids get here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's look at it from Mary's perspective. So from Mary's perspective, ladies, whoever you're with, do you run to him to know more about God? Think about. So good. Remember, you can be with somebody who is a Christian, but do you run to him to know more about God? Because here's the thing: if you trust him while you're by yourself, right together, in terms of single, to give you what God says, whether you like it or not, to lead you to do all these things that the Lord wants you to do, guess what you'll be able to trust him to do as well, ladies? When you have kids, I trust him, and I know my kids will trust him too. See, you see, these are the type of questions and things that we need to be thinking about rather than the good time of what dating brings. Now, I'm not saying go out, laser tag, all this stuff, movies, games, that's great. That's wonderful. But if this stuff is not in the back of your mind, the kids will suffer later because of that. Because no wonder so many of our kids, they literally, I mean, you saw it when you were here, they did not want to leave. They literally did not want to leave. You know, they were outside packing everything very slowly into the van. We don't want to go. We don't want to go because they understood, man, this is something special here.
Yes.
So the way that you can come to him for questions about God to lead you, and the way that you can come to her, that's the way your kids will come to him or her. So, I mean, it's a beautiful concept, but these are some things that we have to be thinking about before the kids even get here. So we laid the foundation. We saw that. We saw how it affects the kids positively and negatively as well. We saw that the home and the church should be the safe place and the safe haven, right? But here's the last thing I want to look at is, what if you're listening and as a youth or as a parent that's in that tough situation. So sometimes when you hear stuff like this, man, I miss my opportunity for my Joseph. I miss my opportunity for my Mary or for my Hannah or for my Abigail. I missed my opportunity because I married a joker or I married this guy. You know, it happens. You know, we hear those stories. So now how do we give them hope? You know, I think about Joseph. You think about Joseph's situation in Genesis. He came from a dysfunctional family. There was favoritism there. His brothers hated him, threw him away. So now look at what Joseph was able to do. So I talked to a buddy of mine, Sam Lawrence, and he talked about this. He said, remember when Joseph's son was born, coming from where you're about to go. But remember when Joseph's son was born, and as he looks at his boys, look at what he sees. I'm second in command in Egypt. I'm bringing my family back together. I forgave my family. My father's coming back. We're all together. So now look at what God was able to do with one person. You came from a dysfunctional family. You did have to go through some tough times, but look at what I was able to do for you. So now I think there's some hope, because I think a lot of kids in this situation feel like I can't do that. There's no hope for me. You know, some single wives, some single husbands, there's no hope for me. There is. So kind of talk about there's hope for our brethren out there that are in these situations.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it is difficult, and I'm not going to pretend that it is not.
It is.
You know, especially coming from a home where, you know, if you're married and your spouse doesn't believe, or if they're angry or mean or, you know, abusive, any of that kind of stuff, you know, that is tough. And coming from a single parent family, it does make it more difficult.
It does.
To train your kids. You know, you've got to be even more diligent about it. But you've got to do what we all need to do, but you've got to do it more, is rely on the Lord.
Yep.
You've got to rely on the Lord, and you've got to be in prayer and trusting him and seeking out opportunities for your kids to get them into that right mindset.
Yeah.
Because, you know, trying to come from a single parent family mindset, it's tough because, if you got 2 kids, that means you got all kinds of activities that you want that these kids are going to be involved in. Plus, you've got to provide for those kids. That takes up your time. You've got to work. You've got to do the housework. You've got all kinds of stuff that you are trying to do. And it's like, man, I just cannot. I need Sundays to just relax and be at home.
Yep.
And that is where you're going to start making the wrong decisions. So if you can make it a commitment to yourself, hey, this is important to me, and so I want my kids to understand that it is important for them as well.
Yes, that's great. So this is how I want to close it here. So let's give a message of hope here.
Yeah.
So let's say we're talking to that single mother, that single father. Let's say we're talking to that young man that came from a broken home, that wants a home. That young woman that came from a broken home that wants a better home. All right, let's talk to them for a second. So from Hosea chapter 3, understand that there is hope for you. There is, if you love the Lord, right? He even mentions, right, Matthew chapter 6, seek ye first the kingdom. Whenever you seek, you'll find it.
Yep.
You will find it. So here's the beautiful thing about it for those people that we mentioned. Many times we think, because of the home I came out of, I don't deserve a good guy. I don't deserve a good girl. I don't deserve this person because I made so many mistakes, or my family made so many mistakes, so I don't feel deserving of this, right?
Sure.
So think about it from Hosea's perspective. Gomer cheats on him twice. Cheats on him twice, right? So after she cheats on him twice, I may or may not have watched Hallmark movies, but that's beside the point. But if I happen to watch those, this will be a Hallmark movie moment. So Hosea chapter 3, verse 1, the Lord talked to Hosea and a woman that caused a broken home. Go love that woman, beloved of her friend who loves somebody else, yet an adulteress, but love her according to the love of the Lord. Right? Who looked after other gods and loved flagons of wine. So notice what Hosea did in verse 2. So I bought her. So think about what Jesus did for us. He bought us. So to that young man that comes from a broken home, guess what? There's somebody out there for you to buy, who you'll love. That young woman who came from a broken divorce home, there's a man that's going to love you and wants to buy you. That widowed woman who has kids, there's a man out there that wants to buy you. But notice this. So I bought her for 15 pieces of silver and for a homer of barley and a half homer of barley. So he bought her for more than what she was worth. So now you feel like, I don't deserve him. I don't deserve a guy like that. I don't deserve a girl like that. If someone's willing to give you that, that's a beautiful thing. I know it's easy to run away from, but it's a beautiful thing. So then notice, here's the Hallmark moment, verse 3. Then I said to her, you will stay with me for many days, and you will not play the harlot, and you will not be for any other man. I will be just for you. So now, if you've come from this broken home, obviously this is why things like dating and stuff should be taken seriously, so that you won't be in that position. But if you happen to be in that position, there's still hope for you too. Because God says, I still love. There's people out there that love like me out there. So it's important for the kids to understand, if you're listening, there's people out there that will love you, that will take care of you. You'll have your youth ministers. You'll have guys like myself and Andy, and, give Liz, some brownie points. I mean, Liz loves you have women out there that love you guys too. So understand, when you come here, you have people that will love you like Hosea loved Gomer. So just kind of some closing thoughts for you, Andy, but understand there is hope no matter what situation that you're in.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think that this example not only is that there are people on this earth that will love and care for you, as a kid or as an adult who feels lost or separated. But there is also the fact that the Lord bought, like you said, he bought all of us.
All of us.
And he was willing to do that for all of us. And so he wants us to be with him.
Mm-hmm.
So he's not gonna, this life may be tough. And knowing that we have hope in Jesus Christ, and learning, spending time in the Word and understanding and being together as Christians and doing things with youth and incorporating all of those things into our lives is going to be the best support system that we could ever have.
Absolutely. And here's one last point. I didn't want to miss this. When you talk about as we're growing, as we're developing, here's one thing you can do for someone, and there's one thing you can't do for someone. So Peter mentions if you married someone that is without, or that is not a member, or is not saved, you can be an example to them. He says that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But here's one thing you can do to the people that you're seeing, dating, married, whatever. You can be an example to them. But that man that you're with right now, that woman that you're with, you can't change them. You can be an example to him or her, but whether they're a Christian or not, you cannot change them. And so this is why I hate seeing our young women like Abigail here in Scripture. Good, I'm talking about good Christian girls who get with these guys and they think somehow I can change them. You can't. I promise you guys, you can try. And most people, please don't though. But you can't change them. You can be an example to them, but you can't change them. So when we talk about gelling and getting together, this is something that at some point he has to want for himself.
Absolutely.
At some point, this is something that she has to want. You can't change somebody. You can be an influence. And so I think so many times we get into these situations where we marry people and we think we can change them, but you can't. So we gotta be careful with that too, because I want to make sure our listeners understand that too. So, but as we talked about this, Andy, man, this has been great. This has been great. There's been sermons out of here. This is great, and I hope you guys enjoyed this too, because there's so much there's so much for the kids to learn. There's so much for us as single people to learn. There's so much for where even Andy's at, being married, almost having a child, to learn. I mean, you're always growing and gelling. And I think one thing that we can learn is, I think there's a beauty in gelling with somebody and going through the process. I mean, being there during the valleys. I mean, being there when it's tough, being there when it's good. I mean, there's a beauty in it. And if you go through that with somebody, I think you'll see the beauty. I think you'll see it. So, Andy, man, I appreciate you being on. This is not going to be your last time.
Yeah.
This is not going to be your last time. I really appreciate you. This is fun. So, Lord willing, what's today? Today's what? Monday? No, Saturday. We'll be back. I'm lost on my days. So, Lord willing, we will be back Monday with another podcast. So we got some guests on. So I'm really looking forward to that. Appreciate you guys, and Lord willing, we will see you guys then. Thanks, guys.